The first question of crime and punishment is the third question on the exam paper, and it always say explain one way something was similar or different to something else. It's worth 4 marks, so you know by now that it's roughly 1 paragraph. So always start it off by stating the similarity or difference, depending on whether it's asking you to state a similarity or a difference. Give an example, give a detail, and then sum it up at the end. So here's my example, and remember it's from 2021. Explain one way in which the use of prison as a punishment in the years 1700 to 1900 was different from the use of prison as a punishment in the years 1900 to present. And my answer: one way in which the use of prison as a punishment in the years 1700 to 1900 was different from the use of prison as a punishment in the years 1900 to present is that the purpose of prison changed. In the years 1700 to 1900, the focus was upon captivity, hard labour, and punishing the body. For example, the silent system in the 1860s, inmates were forced to do hard labour for 12 hours a day. In addition, if they did speak, they were given a diet of bread and water. In the year 1900 to present day, the focus is upon rehabilitation. Prisoners are sometimes given rehab orders to help their addictions, and education is available in prisons. So there, really clearly, one way prison as a punishment is different prison as a punishment in these 2 time periods. And the mark scheme is really clear, so it just says showing good knowledge and understanding of the period, and features of the period are analysed to explain the difference. Both of those things have done in that question. The next crime and punishment question is worth 12 marks, and it's an explain why. It's normally a causation question, so a cause question. And the example that we're going to use is from 2021. So explain why there have been changes in the crime of theft in the years 1900 to present. You may use the following in your answer: credit cards and shoplifting. So I think this question's really straightforward. A lot of this you won't even have learned in history. It will just be common sense or information you've picked up in your everyday lives. So the first way that theft has changed between 1900 to present is because of the use of credit cards. I've chosen to pick this one here. You can do both. You could do 1, you could do 3 of your own. It doesn't matter. If a thief obtains the PIN in the late 20th century, they are able to steal a significant amount of money or credit. Before the advent of credit cards, a thief might steal a wallet or a purse, and that would be the end of the theft. In the modern period, a thief might be able to carry out multiple thefts until the bank account or credit limit has been reached. In addition, the criminal doesn't need to be anywhere near the victim of the crime. Criminals have learnt how to clone cards and can even use the cards over the internet to make purchases. So they're really clear about how the crime of theft has changed in between these 2 dates, so 1900 to present. The second way that there have been changes in the crime of theft is the advancement of technology, often referred to as cybercrime. It is now possible to hack into a device and steal sensitive information or bank information. This information then can be sold on the black market or used to commit further theft. In the early 20th century, this was not possible. It was only physical theft that was possible. In the present day, banks can be hacked and information stolen without the victim noticing for some time. Furthermore, entire businesses can be hacked and have information stolen at scale. This was not possible in the early 20th century. So I haven't written about shoplifting there. I've gone on to cybercrime, which again is completely fine as long as it answers the question. The final way that theft has changed is the organisation and sophistication of gangs. Car crime is one of the largest categories of crime in the 20th century. Gangs target cars and attempt to change the registration plates to make detection more difficult for the police. In addition, gangs may break the car down into smaller pieces and sell off parts cheaply in order to profit off of the theft. This level of organisation was not possible at the start of the 20th century, as cars were not yet common and thieves did not have the knowledge. So let's have a look at the mark scheme for this one. So this is an explain why question. So it says there, an analytical explanation is given which is directed consistently at the conceptual focus of the question. So this one here was cause and change. So like, what caused the change? Showing a line of reasoning that is coherent, sustained, and logically structured. Accurate and relevant information is precisely selected to address the question directly. So maybe this last paragraph here needs to be polished a little bit, but this here is an acceptable answer. Probably would get you into level 4. So the next part of the exam, remember, you need to pick question 5 or question 6. I've given you this structure, so you make an introduction, that's 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs to agree, 2 paragraphs to disagree, and conclusion. I'll explain why I've done that in a moment. This question is worth 20 marks. Your exam paper is worth 52 marks. So the majority of your marks will come from this question, and it's important that we get it right. So this is question 5 from the exam paper 2021, and the question is: the role of religion was the main reason why crimes against authority increased in the years 1500 to 1700. How far do you agree? You may use the following in your answer: religious change and vagabonds. Now, this question I think is really difficult because authority changed between 1500 to 1700. So we had religion changing all over the place. Then the monarch, we got rid of them. We had the interregnum and Oliver Cromwell stepped in, then the monarch was brought back. So religion in amongst all that is quite difficult. And I've given you an example of how I would approach this question. And the reason that I've said an introduction, agree, disagree, and a conclusion is because under here it says showing a line of reasoning that is coherent, sustained, and logically structured. So whatever your conclusion is going to be, it needs to be sustained throughout the entire answer. And an easy way of doing that is to include an introduction, because then it's clear at the start, but it needs to be repeated all the way throughout your answer. So you have to have quite a lot of thought before you start answering this question. So here's my answer. Let's just go over the question again. The role of religion was the main reason why crimes against authority increased 1500 to 1700. So here's my introduction. While vagabonds and smuggling were crimes from 1500 to 1700, they were not as serious as the crimes against authority caused by religion. The Reformation highlighted that the king was not a sovereign power in England, and the gunpowder plot endangered the king's life. In contrast, vagabonds caused petty crimes at the local area level, and smuggling never endangered the king's life. So it's really clear there that I've said religion was more dangerous than vagabonds and smuggling. So I know from my introduction what I'm going to write about. So my first paragraph to agree. During the Reformation and during the Tudors' religious turbulence, a greater number of people began to question the king's authority over religion. For hundreds of years, religion belonged to the Roman Catholic Church. The change to Protestantism meant that a large section of the population committed the crime of heresy. This undermined the king's sovereignty as head of state, and many were, therefore, accused of treason. The two crimes almost became interchangeable throughout the period. It highlighted the king's weakness as an authority over religion. That's my first paragraph to agree. Next paragraph to agree. And look at the way I've started it. Less than 100 years later, religion was the cause of a plot to kill James I. So as I'm writing this exam paper, maybe I can't remember the exact amount of years, but I know it's somewhere around 100. I know it's less than 100, so that's what I've included. There had been significant tension between the crown's authority since Elizabeth I was excommunicated from Catholicism by the Pope. It encouraged Catholics to plot against her. As James I tightened laws against Catholics, a group of them planned to blow up Parliament during the state opening of Parliament. This meant it was not only the king's authority that was being challenged, but the majority of the English aristocracy. This is an example of treason, and the direct cause was a move away from Catholicism towards Protestantism, in other words, religion. So there, 2 strong paragraphs for religion undermining or challenging the authority of the person in charge. So next, vagabonds were seen as a challenge to authority as they were not bound by the normal methods of social control in early modern England. In this period, most people were born and died in the same village. These men often turned to crime because they could not find work when they arrived at a new village. This was a problem because crime was dealt with at the village level without centralised systems. So in other words, men could travel from place to place, commit crimes in different villages, and there wasn't much central control over that information. No one really had a grasp on what was going on. Therefore, a series of laws were passed in the mid-16th century to combat this. This was a crime against local authority and not as serious as a crime against the monarch. Remember, in the Mark scheme, it says that my judgment needs to be sustained throughout. So I've given a clue there that even though this is a disagree paragraph, I'm about to go for agree. Next paragraph. During the 17th century, the government introduced an import on duties, so a tax on things coming into the country. Smuggling was a crime against authority, as custom duties should have been paid to the crown. A range of goods such as alcohol and tea should have brought revenue for the crown. While smuggling undermined this income, it was a crime that was very difficult to prevent. England had hundreds of miles of coastline and the crime was socially acceptable. Therefore, many people did not view it as a serious crime. While smuggling clearly was a crime against authority, it was not as dangerous or seen as serious as the crimes that involved religion. And again, I've hinted that I'm going back to this. So my conclusion. In conclusion, the role of religion was not the main reason that crimes against authority existed from 1500 to 1700, but they posed the most serious risks to the life of the king and exposed his lack of authority over religion. Therefore, it is completely true that religion was the main crime against authority, but it was certainly the most dangerous for the monarch. Okay, and this is question 6. So again, you pick 5 or 6. You don't do both of them. And again, this question in normal exams will be worth 20 marks. Remember, your paper is worth 52. It's a really important question. So the question: there had been little progress in dealing with the crime of smuggling in the period 1700 to present. How far do you agree? Explain your answer. You may use the following: public attitudes and smuggling gangs. So again, I've given introduction, 2 paragraphs to agree, 2 paragraphs to disagree, and conclusion. So, my introduction. It is accurate to say there's been little progress to combat the crime of smuggling. While modern day techniques have attempted to reduce smuggling, it does still take place as smugglers are often successful. So I've given a clue there that the crime of smuggling is still a problem. So in my paragraph to agree. There has been little progress in dealing with smuggling because the public directly benefit from the cheaper goods that smugglers provide. As the victim is the government's bank balance, there is also strong public sentiment that the crime is victimless, so the public think the crime doesn't have a victim. Therefore, unlike crimes such as drink driving, smuggling has remained a crime that respectable members of the community support and encourage. This makes it difficult for the authorities to combat. The smugglers always have a market. The second reason there's been little progress with the crime of smuggling is because the authorities cannot monitor all access points into and out of the country. Britain has a long and exposed coastline. This means that small boats travel to and from Europe without being detected. In the modern period, the media often reports on the smuggling of people but ignores the social acceptability of smuggling goods. And then my paragraph to disagree. One reason to disagree is that attempts to deal with smuggling have become more organised in the 20th century. Organisations such as Interpol coordinate across multiple different countries and institutions to ensure that smuggling is not successful. In addition, countries now work more closely in collaboration together since the creation of the European Union. This noted, the fact that Interpol sets up huge operations to catch smugglers highlights that smuggling remains a profitable business. So here, we've disagreed, and then I've given a hint that I'm going back to agree. So my sustained judgment is there throughout my answer. A second reason to agree is that smuggled goods are easily identifiable in the late 20th century. Alcohol and cigarettes, some of the most smuggled items, have information on each packet that clearly display import duties have been paid. As their identification is obvious, it is possible for the authorities to prosecute not only the smugglers, but also the customers of smuggling. While there is a further level of deterrence compared to 1700, people still buy in smuggled goods and alcohol. And again there, I've referenced back to my agree. The multi-agency approach to reduces smuggling has reduced smuggling. However, there remains demand for smuggled goods and smugglers are still successful. Therefore, while smuggling may not have reduced, there have been clear progress in how the authorities are dealing with smuggling. So here, I've made sure I've got a sustained judgment throughout my answer, and that's probably the most important thing in getting the upper marks for this question. So, just like with the previous question, question 4, you're capped at the amount of marks you could get if you don't go beyond the stimulus points. So if it's a level 2 answer, you can't get any more than 7. It's a level 3 answer, you can't get any more than 11. And again, you need to stick with the focus of the question, and your line of reasoning needs to be sustained throughout the entire answer.